William, here is the technology. I've asked you to simply make it smaller.
Okay, sir, and that's what we're trying to do, but honestly, it's impossible.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps.
I didn't want airplane mode. I wanted do not disturb.
You wanted night mode?
Yeah. It's called do not disturb.
Night mode.
Don't disturb me, Tyler.
Night mode on. Entering night mode.
During the day. It's about 1 in the afternoon. No, it's longer than that. It's 3.
It's longer than 1?
It's longer than 1. Welcome to Marveling, an
Hello.
exploration of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in podcast form. I'm Courtney.
I'm Tyler, and we're going to be diving into Iron Man 1 this week,
Yeah.
which is good, because it's a good one.
It's the first one.
Yeah.
It's the very first one. It's our introduction to this entire universe, even though we've now watched 2 others
We've watched
before
some
it.
other ones, yeah. Going in chronological order.
Yeah.
So this is the
So
third
now
one.
we're in 2008. We went from the 40s to the 90s to 2008,
Yeah,
right?
that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Why not? Before we super get into this movie, I just wanted to talk about a cool thing that is happening out on the internet recently.
We like cool things.
I like cool stuff. I'm a cool person. I'm hip to what the kids are into, which is Adam Savage doing his damnedest to build an Iron Man suit.
Yeah, I mean, he facilitated the creation of the suit. I don't know if he built it.
Well, he commissioned
He
it.
found someone to
kind of.
build it, and then found someone to wear it,
Well, he wanted to wear it, but then
but he wussed out.
well, he didn't wuss out. I feel like there's some serious... Anyways, Adam Savage was doing a talk somewhere, and they invited him. They had a metal 3D printer and asked if he wanted it anything, and he apparently was like, yeah, give me a full Iron Man suit.
Printed titanium or something.
Yeah,
right?
they printed-
It was at like a college in Colorado, I think. Is that
Something
it?
like that.
Yeah.
But he's doing a new show, I guess, on extreme engineering, and this is one of his projects. And then he also found some people that are doing work with like jet engines for their hands and feet. Basically.
No big deal.
NBD.
Pretty normal stuff.
And he got one of the creators or people that works on that to wear his very bulky Iron Man armor and
With
do a little
his
fly around.
Not repulsor, but whatever the technology is
Yeah.
that the guy invented to actually hover around.
And it was really funny because he couldn't bend his knees.
Yeah, well, he did look kind of awkward, and the proportions of the suit were like a little.
They're a little all over the
funky.
place. Plus the like propulsor thing is like enormous.
Yeah,
Has
he had
to go
like
in his back.
2 giant rockets on each of
Yeah.
his arms.
So what we're saying is here we are in 2019 and the tech isn't quite here yet.
Yeah, well, we're getting there though.
We are getting there. I mean, this is, Adam said in that video, he was like, this is the tech that Iron Man would be using. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of glad that he's went a different way. He made up some stuff that's not real because it's a little bit.
It's a little bit cooler.
A little bit cooler, a little bit more.
His suit's a little bit less
more
bulky.
better.
More better.
More better.
More better. But so we binged Iron Man this week.
We went on a bender.
Like Tony Stark.
Yeah, an Iron Man bender.
Oh, God. So we're here to talk about... Do you want to get into it? Do you want to talk about this movie?
No, I'm good.
Okay, podcast done. That was
Yeah,
easy.
let's get into it here because there's a lot. They lay a lot of groundwork and they do a good
Yes.
job of sort of grounding this in a real world and
Yes.
but, also creating a lot of stuff that's going to go forward into some of the other movies and build this MCU.
The MCU.
Yeah.
No, they definitely did. Like, this is Marvel's first movie, so they're testing out a lot of things. They're not quite sure how they want stuff to look yet. And they're, like, of course, taking a big old gamble on, like, RDJ. So there's a couple of things here that, like, you notice that look a little off, that change from movie to movie, like, just things that Tony does, sort of things. But it's also super amazing that, like, this is the movie that started it all and establishes characters that, like, even a decade later are still, like, really big players.
Yeah.
Which, is there any other franchise that can really, like, claim that?
No, I mean, all the other big franchises kind of come and go, where Lord of the Rings is hot for 3 years and it's still around, but then there's no more movies coming out and it's kind of in the background, and Star Wars comes in for for 6 or 8 years and
Yeah.
then dips back out for...
I mean, James Bond has like pretty consistent characters throughout the whole series, but there are a lot of different actors. Like,
yeah,
this is...
well, and they're not really reboots, but they're loosely tied together, but really
Right.
it's each actor's series is that.
Right. But yeah, it was nice to rewatch again. It was definitely like a pretty big, like, oh yeah, this is what these fight scenes used to look like, sort of thing.
I think the CG though overall for this is for 2008.
Yes.
It holds up pretty well. And I think part of that is towards the end, a lot of the stuff takes place at night, so it's easier to hide stuff. But even the stuff in the desert, it was pretty flawless, I thought.
And they did do a lot of stuff, especially with like the shots of like Tony in the Iron Man suit with his helmet up, like that's like a practical suit.
Yeah, he was wearing
sort of
like
thing.
from the chest up kind of thing.
Which is definitely something that they pulled away from pretty hard in the later movies.
Yeah.
But it looked very good. Like it looked...
No, it did. And there, I mean, even in Infinity War, there was some wonky Mark Ruffalo in the armor.
Oh, with his weird little head.
Yeah, like it's floating in nowhere because he's just not actually in a giant suit.
But at least in Endgame, which
spoilers
before
for
we get
all
into
of the
super
MCU
into this,
movies here.
Yeah, we're gonna be really spoilery. At least for Endgame, like Gwyneth Paltrow was wearing at least some kind of like practical suit for her stuff as Rescue.
Yeah,
because she's got like behind the scenes photos that she wasn't supposed to post.
Yeah, there were a lot of those that leaked out after a couple weeks after Endgame came out, where they weren't. None of the actors were supposed to have any cameras or anything.
She posted that during Infinity War.
Oh, really?
She posted it like a long time ago.
Well, Gwyneth Paltrow is kind of
she doesn't know where she is.
Yeah.
She didn't know she was in Spider-Man.
One thing I did want to touch on before we get too deep into the movie itself was previously we talked a little bit about the history of the MCU, talking about the rights and how Marvel, to save themselves from bankruptcy, sold the rights to Spider-Man, X-Men, Fantastic Four, blah, blah, blah. And we were talking about why they didn't sell the rights off to some of the other characters like Iron Man, Captain America, and all that. And in doing research for this movie, I kind of learned that they actually did. There was an Iron Man movie in the 90s that was in active development. And there were Captain America movies that were weird ones that were coming out in like the 70s and 90s that were not great. But in the 90s, they were in active development. And I think it was Universal, or it jumped around to a couple different studios. But part of it was they just didn't have the capability to do the graphics and the effects and everything. But originally, Tom Cruise was in talks to be...
Tom Cruise was... I looked this up. We said there was Nick Cage was in talks to do this.
So, and this would have been like a late 90s version of Iron Man, which would have been pretty bonkers, I think.
That would have been insane. Little tiny Tom Cruise in an Iron Man suit. Like...
Yeah, no, it would have been... It would have been funny or like kind of entertaining as a one-off, but it wouldn't have built a universe, I don't think.
I also read that apparently Quentin Tarantino was approached to direct this, which could you imagine?
Yeah. Well, and that would have been before Kill Bill, and he still was a little bit excessive, but it was before his super crazy violent Inglourious Bastards, Kill Bill's era of stuff or whatever.
Still there would have been a lot more feet in this movie.
So, and what ended up happening is the couple studios tried to develop it, and then the rights ended up reverting back to Marvel. So by mid 2000s, they had it in their possession and were able to develop it on their own and created Marvel Studios and all of that. So,
well, that's cool.
Corrections corner.
Oh.
So we don't get any angry.
Toot. Well, I'm very glad they got it back, because I supremely love the universe that they built, and I think that this version of Tony Stark is incredible.
Yes.
I can't imagine really anybody else, because like we've said before, RDJ is essentially playing himself.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Well, and Jon Favreau has said he cast him because he is someone who had a dark past, and Iron Man in the comics has struggled with alcoholism and all of that, and he saw Robert Downey Jr. being able to portray that because he lived similarly or whatever.
This movie obviously was during like a really like hard time kind of in our political climate and our like wartime climate. Yeah. Which is, I love that they don't shy away from it. And I do think that they portray, like, this movie opens cold. This movie opens cold to Tony in a Humvee.
I was freezing.
in the desert. I was freezing. To Tony in a Humvee and getting ambushed. Like, super serious combat. Yeah. Like, all the soldiers he was just bantering with die, like, right off. It's it's
pretty
very
dark,
aggressive.
yeah.
It's very
well, and it starts light. He's joking around with them when
Yeah.
they're driving, and you're getting a good kind of sense of his character. How did you think some of the banter held up between him when he's like calling out, or not calling out, but he's like gets startled by the driver because she's
I
a woman.
had no
and-
idea you were a woman. I honestly, I don't think it was like, it wasn't excessive and it wasn't like sexist in any kind of way. Like it just felt very Tony. Like he could say that to really anyone, or like it felt fine. And I love the like, I don't want to see this on your MySpace page. Like,
Well, and there's a few, like they have like an old timey cell phone.
Right.
And this is like just before iPhones and everything. So
Right.
There's a few of those relics of the past.
I honestly, like, in terms of his banter and in terms of like who he is as a character, like RDJ has done a very good job with, he established Tony and who Tony is here, and this Tony has not changed.
Yeah.
He's a little bit more jaded in the later movies, of course.
Well, and he feels the weight. I think what this movie does from beginning to end is he starts to see sort of the ramifications of
Right.
how he was and how it affects the world, and
Right.
it becomes his mission to sort of course correct and take responsibility for his actions. And
Well, he also, like, as even in which, when we get into Iron Man 2, like, he's talking about privatizing world peace, and he's like, I think he's this sets the groundwork that then goes into Age of Ultron and Civil War, that he like wants to protect the world and be
well, and there's a big part of him that he has a big ego, obviously, but I think
Right.
he's not full of himself, but what he needs to learn is that he can't do it
Right.
by himself, and he's
Right.
not the
which I think he gets that lesson
be-all,
hard
end-all.
in Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
real hard.
Well, and that's sort of the culmination of Infinity War is the team is split at that point, and that's ultimately why they fail, because they're still divided. So
Right. He ends up being ambushed by a terrorist cell in Afghanistan and
The 10
captured.
rings.
The 10 rings, exactly. And they want him to build more of his Jericho missiles that he had just shown off for their use. While he is in this cave in the middle of Afghanistan, he is put in with a doctor, Yinsen, who ends up putting some kind of electromagnet in Tony's chest to prevent shrapnel from reaching Tony's heart, which then Tony's like, no, fuck this, I can upgrade this. And creates a little mini arc reactor, which is ridiculous.
Jensen helps him, though.
He does.
Gives him a helping paw.
Of course he helps him. It's kind of really amazing how quickly this movie goes from a very charismatic, very full of himself, very self-centered Tony to getting help from this man who is obviously not coming from wealth, has had a much harder life than Tony, and just the way that it like very immediately seems to shift Tony. Not only does he see what his weapons are actually being used for and come face to face with someone who has experienced these weapons and their diabolical
he finds
purpose.
out that his family was killed.
Yeah.
And I think that definitely weighs on him.
It's just a very solid, this all happens within the first 30 minutes of this movie.
Yeah.
And it's a very solid, character arc. Super quickly.
And one thing it does well, it jumps back just before we get into the cave with the terrorists. We flash back and you meet all the supporting characters, and you get more of a sense of sort of the playboy lifestyle that Tony leads. And you meet Rhodey, you meet Pepper, you meet Obadiah. And I think that just helps.
Meet Happy.
Yes. That helps add weight to when he returns and sees them all again, and there's more emotional weight. Whereas if the movie just was going straight forward and you don't see that flashback, you don't understand all of the characters and everything at that point. No,
they give it 24 hours to set up his relationship with all of these people, and they do it super beautifully. Obadiah is cleaning up after him, accepting an award. Rhodey is also to an extent cleaning up after him, is his friend to the end, but is exasperated with him always. Pepper is super exasperated forever, but is clearly super loyal to Tony. It sets all these relationships up very quickly and very intimately, very well. Yeah, well, and
they do the little, at the award ceremony, the media package where you get a little history of Tony, and you find out that he's this wonderkind, and he was in college as a teenager and was inventing stuff at a young age. And
which also, watching this chronologically, we've already met Howard Stark. So seeing Tony, then later it just clicks in very well. Makes a lot of sense and kind of gives you more of a helps bridge that gap from Cap to this, like what happened to Howard, kind of how Tony took over the company, and a little bit of
they set up that he died, and they don't. It's not even like there's nothing hanging over it or whatever. It's just sort of matter of fact that he died in a car accident in 1991. But
don't the Starks die in the 70s?
No,
is it 1991?
Yeah, because it's Tony's born in the 70s.
Mission Report. December 1990. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, in the flashback or the simulation in Civil War is them leaving to go on that trip.
Right.
And Tony is in his 20s or whatever. So, or like late teens.
Which is the weirdest de-aging, I think, in the entire Marvel universe. But we'll talk about that later. But it's the most uncanny valley. Yeah.
Well, and I think, not to get too deep into it, like you said, we're going to get into later, but that in particular doesn't bug me because it's a computer simulation anyway. So you can sort of chalk some of that up to that. But let's go back into the cave.
Back to 2008.
Yes, we're 2008. We're in a cave. We've just made a new friend.
Yinsen. And he's been tasked with creating the Jericho missile, but they of course decide that they're not going to do that. Like, no way.
Yeah.
And so then decide that they're going to come up with some kind of suit of armor to break them out of this cave and get out, I guess. I'm not even like entirely sure where like the suit of armor idea came from, but I guess they were thinking they needed protection as well as some firepower. Yeah.
I think this is sort of the first leap of logic that the movie makes, where you just sort of have to go with it, where he's...
Yes.
I mean,
he's going to be Iron Man, so he's got to make an iron suit. I mean, I get it. Which is also funny because I believe, like, later in the movie, he says, it's not actually iron, it's made of some synthetic whatever. And, like, I think this is the only actual iron suit.
Yeah. Well, and I like how kind of crude it is. And, I mean, it's well constructed, obviously, but it looks more handmade than the previous.
It's bulky. It looks like Adam Savage's suit.
Yeah.
It's very bulky. It's, like, hard to deal with. Something that I found really interesting about this movie, which will then like play into the rest of the Iron Man movies, is Iron Man 3 deals a lot with Tony's PTSD after the attack on New York, and a lot of stuff. Tony was fucking captured and tortured by terrorists and does not seem to deal with much PTSD about that.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, Tony's whole deal is sort of always moving forward,
right?
And that's part of why he's drinking, maybe not necessarily to forget, but just to sort of numb some of that pain and some of the trauma that he had with his parents. And then I think you can sort of lump that in there with it, where he was affected by that, but he's coping with it in his way. And then in the Battle of New York
just comes to a head that he can't deal with.
But it's also it's way too big. It's this intergalactic scope where all these aliens are coming, and he's still and it would be fucking scary to be captured by terrorists, but at least that's sort of a real world thing, and he has a reference for that it's not like he's caught off guard or
he
whatever.
Also goes into that portal to deliver that nuke and like sees the extent of everything beyond.
Yes. So I think that's what breaks his brain is the sort of the scope of everything, where it's like a whole, he realizes that they're just this small little ant.
Right.
And
now he's trying to figure out a way to save the Earth from all of that.
Yeah. Well, and the whole universe.
The whole multiverse. They end up creating this super crude suit. The terrorist cell is kind of like on to the fact that they're not creating Jericho missiles.
Yeah, they're like, I like and hate how bumbling they are, though, where they're like on they're watching on the monitor and they're like, what does he do?
That doesn't look like a missile.
And they're like holding up the plant like trying to compare and whatever. But
they definitely let them like get away with a lot, and there's like a passage of time that I don't quite understand. I think he's gone for about a month. Is that what he says?
I think, they do say something. I can't remember what the number is now, but it's at least a couple weeks, or if not a month or two.
So they do create it like kind of quickly in the time that they have, but they end up creating this suit, which is powered by his little unstable battery-powered arc reactor.
Yeah.
And in order for Tony to be able to suit up and for the program to load and for him to be able to do all that, Yinsen has to basically sacrifice himself.
Yeah, the goons are like at the door and they've got a bomb rigged to the door, and
Yinsen grabs a machine gun and says, screw it. Like,
Yeah.
which also just, he and Yinsen have had a lot of time to talk this over, and he becomes like a real father figure to Tony very quickly, I think, in the way that Tony says later that Howard was never really like loving or caring and didn't give him a lot of encouragement. And Yinsen is telling him that, yes, you can still be a good man. Yes, you can make a difference in this world.
Yeah.
And it's just
Well, they have that moment where the main terrorist, does he even have a name, but he's like they're holding Yinsen down and they're like going to burn his face off or whatever.
Right.
And Tony stops them and says
Right.
that he needs him. Like,
Right.
And obviously, I mean, however deep their connection is or whatever, I think Tony's going to do that regardless just to
Right.
save him. But I think it does help sort of highlight that they've bonded in that time together.
And I can only imagine how quickly you would bond with someone in a situation like that, especially when you're both trying to covertly figure out a way
Yeah.
to break out. Like,
Well, and it's cool because Jensen's obviously from a very different world, but they share that common interest and knowledge, and they're able to bond over the creation of all the technology and everything.
Yeah.
Because Jensen comes from a similar background.
right. But so he manages to get out and tears the ever-living shit out of the terrorist base and all of the Stark weapons that were housed there that the terrorist has been stealing.
The first the first goon that he knocks out is Tom Morello, the guitar player from Rage Against the Machine.
No shit, really?
Yeah.
Oh my god, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he is like the guitar player in all the music.
Oh, okay.
Because the score for this is done by Roman Giovanni, who you may know from Game of Thrones, but it's like a very heavy metal
Yes.
rock
Because
inspired.
they're super influenced by the song Iron Man.
Yeah, and AC/DC and all of
Yes.
that. So all of the music has like distorted guitar and stuff.
That's amazing. So he gets free and his suit achieves flight for a short period of time, but he's not really able to get very far and kind of crashes and burns. And it's kind of crazy that he survives that fall that he does.
Well, and I think slowly the movie starts to like push the boundaries of what is
reality.
real, and sort of the creating the Iron Man suit is the first step, and then this is the next step, and then it's just going to keep kind of pushing that a little bit until we get
That's
all the way to
always
the end.
my dad's problem. He's like, and at least when we were watching Infinity War, he was like, Thanos punching Tony in the face would just rip his head off. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right.
But nanobots.
Nanobots. But yeah, so he manages to escape and he manages to flag down a convoy and is first greeted by Rhodey. They immediately establish that they're like a funny pair, even though I don't think that RDJ and Terrence Howard's chemistry is really there, which... Side note, this is our first and only movie with Terrence Howard, because in the next movie he's replaced by Don Cheadle, of course, because of money disputes, as it turns out.
He was the first one cast for this movie, so
Right.
he actually made more
Than RDJ.
than Robert did.
But then when RDJ was going to get a pay increase for Iron Man 2, obviously Terrence Howard was pissed that was going to happen and he wasn't going to still be making more than RDJ.
Yeah, well, and I think they were going to pay him even less
Yeah.
than they paid him for Iron Man 1. I think he would have been fine if he still made the same, and even if Robert Downey Jr. made more. But they were going to cut his pay back a lot, I guess.
To be honest, I'm glad that he pitched a fit and ended up, because I like Don Cheadle a lot more. But so he gets to go home. He goes home to LA and gets a cheeseburger immediately, is reconnected with Pepper, reconnected with Happy. And
Is a Burger King cheeseburger an American cheeseburger? How do you feel about that?
I mean, Burger King is an American company, isn't it?
I know, but it's like fast food. It's not.
Well, yeah, but isn't the Burger King thing because RDJ said he like hit rock bottom when he realized like the shit that he was eating from Burger King?
Well, it's probably more that Burger King was going to pay X number of dollars to Marvel Studios to be the.
Yes, I mean it's definitely. I don't know. It's a hamburger. Tony likes hamburgers.
I know. Well, and I guess this was before we're like
In-N-Out
in
was
sort
huge.
of this wave of like artisanal cheeseburgers now.
I
But
like my hipster hamburgers
Yes.
with my hoppy IPAs. And
I just thought it was like a little bit of excessive product placement.
yeah. I mean, it's at least it turns into Audi in the later movies, which I don't mind looking at Audis.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we also then meet Agent Coulson kind of very quickly because he wants to debrief Tony, which again, watching this in the chronological order is awesome because now we're seeing like the Agent Coulson that's like seen some shit.
Yeah.
And he's a little bit more confident and he's out on his own kind of
Although
doing
we
stuff.
get the sort of the first like not flaw, but it's obviously it was a reworking where in this movie SHIELD is seemingly a new organization and they like coincidentally have like a really cool long name and the letters of each name form a word, but they don't know what that word is yet.
Right. Well, and they retcon it as quickly after as like Iron Man 2 because Nick Fury is like, yeah, Howard started S.H.I.E.L.D. So they retcon it pretty quickly. But
and I think that in the sort of the production of this movie, there was a script, but they were doing a lot of improvising. And I think that S.H.I.E.L.D. or the idea of Coulson and all of that stuff was sort of worked in during production or late in sort of the pre-production area, because in looking at they did sort of a script comparison of the last scene, which we'll get into a little bit more, but Coulson is not in that scene at all, and it's all of that dialogue that he has is given to like Pepper or Rhodey. And so I just wonder if it obviously they're throwing a lot of ideas and this is sort of the beginning, so they're going to evolve things and change things as they go. But I think that was a big one. At least it's pretty glaring when you've just watched Captain Marvel and you go into this one, where it obviously at this point they weren't really sure which way they were going with it.
Right, of course, because it's the first one and they're still kind of figuring things out as they go. So Tony is not really supposed to make much of a statement. Obadiah is there, wants to make a bigger kind of grander thing, and Tony is like, yeah, we're not making weapons anymore.
He drops that big bombshell on everyone.
Big bombshell, and noted like freaks Obadiah out, of course, because this is like the Stark Industries' main export at the moment. This is basically it's
what they've always done. That's where like they've done some clean energy projects and his IntelliCrops and all the other weird jargon he comes up with, but that's what they were founded on was weapons all the way back to, if you look at Captain America, he's building the shield and he's experimenting with the Tesseract and all that stuff. So
all that kind of stuff. Speaking of the Tesseract, this is also our first movie in our chronological watch that doesn't bring up Tesseract whatsoever. There's no Infinity Stone mentioned in this one at all, which is, I wonder if they like the Infinity Stone idea was there when this was out, or if that started to culminate when they I
think a lot of the groundwork that we sort of were building to in phase 2 and phase 3 is not really even thought about until we get to Iron Man 2, because that's where they're laying a lot of the seeds for kind of what S.H.I.E.L.D. is going to do and sort of connecting a lot of the dots that will be coming up.
Makes sense.
And I mean, the Infinity Stones or the idea of all of that power in the universe doesn't really fit with the sort of the real or the more realistic take that this movie presents or whatever. So I think it's smart to sort of slowly start to build up the unbelievability of the world as we go or whatever. If that makes any sense.
So Tony's like first decision to deal with when he gets home is to create himself a new arc reactor that doesn't need to be hooked up to a battery. And he has a really kind of like cute, intimate scene with Pepper, with her trying to hook up his new heart.
How deep is that hole in his chest cavity?
I mean, that seems excessively deep. Her hand went in like to the wrist.
Yeah. And even like the arc reactor or even the thing that Jensen built is like a good 4 or 5 inches thick.
I wonder how. Because the shrapnel must not just be all at the front. It must be like deeper in too. So maybe he has like a longer column because he needs to deal with more shrapnel.
Yeah, but I feel like they would have had to like dig out part of his rib cage or something to like fit that cylinder. In his chest.
I think his sternum has a hole in it.
Yeah, well, it must. Yeah.
Ugh.
But how? But they don't do that in Afghanistan because the thing is sort of sitting more on the outside.
Well, he has like
But he's not going to the doctor. He's just operating on himself, and then Pepper helps him. Like,
yeah, let's just put this metal cylinder in my sternum. I can do this awake. It's fine. Yeah, no, there's a little bit of that too. I guess we don't actually really see him. He might go to a hospital for something.
And they like invent some chest cylinder for him.
I guess so. At least something sterile.
Yeah.
But so he gets his brand new arc reactor.
And he's got his silly or his wonky, it's like a rubber bodysuit that he's in because of the angle, and he's like sort of sitting at a weird angle.
Yes.
And Because she actually is sticking her hand
into a
into it or
gooey
whatever. Yeah.
situation. But yeah, and then he decides to pretty much stop going to work, stop dealing with Stark Industries, and works on creating a new version of his Iron Man suit. Because he seems to become kind of obsessed with the idea of being this superhero or
yeah. Well, and he
thing.
definitely likes the spotlight, and
Oh, yeah.
it's sort of his hubris that he wants to be able to share his abilities, but I think it's also more that he wants to show off and be better than everyone else at this point, at least.
Right. And he's also like, he keeps all of the stuff off of the Stark Industries like server, keeps it on his personal server sort of thing, which I think Obadiah could learn a thing from. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Well, and he's running the company at this point, but we never really see him actually running the company. Obadiah is doing it sort of from the in the background. Or
Tony's
whatever.
doing it through Pepper, which is why he later makes Pepper just the CEO. But yeah, there's definitely he's just kind of like, peace out. I'm gonna work on a personal project for a while.
Well, and it's we talked a previous episode about how you at first thought of him sort of as just like a silly Batman, a Bruce Wayne,
right?
And at least in those, you see Bruce Wayne like interacting with board members, and you see more of the sort of the business side. And I think in this, Tony is a lot more laser focused on just what he's interested in, and
which also, I think, because Obadiah basically ran the company for a long time before Tony was ready to come to it anyway. So really his role in it is as superficial as he wants it to be. And he clearly has never really had much of an interest in, he had an interest in the weapons, but as soon as the weapons are gone and he's not focused on making those anymore.
Well, and I think not necessarily even the weapons. He just had an interest in the technology and making, if it was a missile, he wanted to make the best missile he could. Or if it's a hot rod, he was going to rebuild the engine 9 times. And he liked to improve and be the best at whatever he was going to do. This
is also the time that we meet Tony's robots, his little helpers in his home laboratory, which I love them. I love those little robots. It's like the stupidest little cute tie-in, but I just love watching RDJ yell at them.
Well, and they're just the subtle movements and the way that he plays off them, I think is really funny.
Especially the one with the fire extinguisher. Don't.
And we didn't get into Jarvis, but I think Jarvis is a big part of helping Tony be able to automate a lot of the processes to get him to
Jarvis is huge,
rebuild and enhance the suits as we go on.
For such a iconic character, and a character that became super well loved across these movies and the Avengers movies and stuff, it's pretty amazing because Paul Bettany literally recorded all of his lines in about 2 hours as a favor for Jon Favreau.
Well, and I think
he had no idea what he was doing.
It's one of just shows how kind of the care that Marvel Studios takes in. They have him sort of established, and I don't think that they ever in a million years thought that he would become Vision at this point. Right. But just sort of the natural progression of the stories and Vision's in the comics, his origin is he is sort of this android synthetic being that takes the personality of another Avenger called Wonder Man or whatever. So it's sort of a similar thing that Wonder Man obviously wasn't introduced in any of these movies and is sort of a silly character, but the idea of that he is sort of the next evolution of this already existing character, even though Jarvis is not really a character, but he is.
He sasses Tony back. For an automated AI system, he felt like another real character.
Sure.
It didn't feel like it would be Iron Man without Jarvis. And I remember feeling distinctly very freaked out and upset in Age of Ultron when Jarvis seemingly got killed. Yeah. And it was just wow, this is just a
those two fighting orbs or with the blue and the gold orbs or whatever.
But so we meet Jarvis. Tony starts to work on his Iron Man suit, starts to do some test stuff. Which I love watching him trying to figure out flight, trying to figure out all of these different parts of it to make it work, and then eventually ending up painting it. And Jarvis' little quip about you've never been subtle, so of course red, sort of thing.
Well, and it's a good way because in the comics, to keep going back to the comics, because that's what I do.
Comic boy.
The characters always have an inner monologue. So whenever they're doing something, you see the little thought bubbles or the narrations, and you're inside their head, and they're alone building their suit or whatever they're doing. If it's Iron Man, they're building their suit, and you get an insight into what they're doing, what they're thinking about. But in the movies, you're not going to do a voiceover with that. It'd be really cheesy.
Right.
But so Jarvis also is able to be that voice that Tony can sort of
bounce back off and kind of explain what he's doing to the audience, sort of thing. I think they did it really well. Like, RDJ was able to carry a lot of these like solo scenes with him just talking to a not real AI, talking to robots,
or
doing,
when he's
like,
in the suit, doing
things in the air, like with the not real computer, like.
And he's in the suit, and he's in his heads-up display, and it's just him on a green screen, and
just talking to Jarvis, or they did a really good job with that. But he ends up going to a benefit for I think it's a firefighters association, which is where we get our. It's
run by it's part of the Stark Foundation. It's one of his foundations or whatever.
Which is where we get our Stan Lee cameo. Just real quick.
Yes.
Which is he supposed to actually be Hugh Hefner?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think because they do a similar one in Iron Man 2 where he it's got to be a mistake.
He's definitely supposed to be Larry King in Iron Man 2. He's dressed and he has the shoulder pads. He's definitely supposed to be Larry King.
So then I guess he is supposed to be Hugh Hefner in this.
He's got Hugh Hefner's robe on. I don't know. But so we see our little Stan Lee cameo, and he ends up seeing a reporter that he had previously slept with.
Yes. Yeah. We were introduced to her in the flashback for the Vanity Fair
sequence.
Christine Everhart.
Who basically calls Tony on his bullshit because there was a new shipment of weapons that made it to the same terrorist cell, the 10 Rings.
Yeah.
And it's being used to tear apart a village back in Afghanistan.
And it's the same village that Jensen's family was from, too. So I think that just drives that home even a little bit more for Tony.
Which Tony completely abandons Pepper because of this and takes it upon himself to go get back in his Iron Man suit and fly to this village to deal with this, which I think they did a really good job with, again, not shying away from the war-torn situation. Like the shot in the village with the terrorists and like the shooting of the almost shooting of the father, the whole thing was very it's gut-wrenching.
Yeah.
It's really hard to watch, and it makes his decision to do this and decision to save these people like even more legit. Like,
his technology in that scene specifically is with like the targeting computer and all of that or whatever is what am I trying to say? But
it's dope. Is what you're trying to say. And like it's the first like super cool like Iron Man thing.
Yeah. That and he walks and then he blows up the tank and walks away. Yeah.
No, they definitely they made him awesome very quickly. And then he ends up in a little bit of a dogfight with some US fighter jets because they don't know what he is.
Yeah.
Very obviously.
Well, they see the destruction that's going on in the town, and they're like, "What the fuck's
going on?" Which I love the way that Rhodey calls him and is like, "Do you have anything to do with this?" Like, he just knows. Of course, Tony is not going to
Well,
let
and he
this
thinks
go.
that it's some drone or some other piece of technology. He doesn't have any idea that it's actually Tony.
Well, and I love when Tony calls him back and he's like, "It's me, it's me,
and he still doesn't get it either.
No.
Like, he has to be like, "Yeah, it's me. I'm in a suit."
Yeah. Then, of course, causes all sorts of other problems because Tony can't really be around doing that, and Rhodey's trying to cover ass for him. But he manages to save the pilot whose plane crashed into him. His parachute wasn't going. He kind of does that, and he manages to get away.
Well, I think Jarvis says, it doesn't tell him to leave, but there's some, system warning, or, he's pushing the limits of being able to do that, but he doesn't have a choice, and he's going to save that guy.
Right.
So I think then we go back to Afghanistan, right? And we're with the terrorists, and... Yeah,
but there's, a bit of a scene... even before this that we kind of went over that is Obadiah with Tony, right?
Oh, when he's at his house and he's playing the piano or whatever.
Because Tony's basically shut himself in. He's trying to figure out what Tony's doing because obviously Tony's working on something. And he's
I think he showed him the arc reactor, and he wants to get his hands on it basically. Right. But Tony's not giving up or whatever. So I think it does sort of lay the groundwork a little bit for Obadiah. At this point, we don't necessarily know that he's the one behind everything, but
You spoiled it.
he's the type of person that's going to sort of do what he can to get what he wants. And then if he needs to cross that line, he will, but so we're sort of building to that point, I guess.
Which then it turns out that he's already very much crossed that line.
Yes.
And the whole terrorist attack on the convoy in the first place was Obadiah's doing.
Yes. Well, and I think it was to kill Tony. It was just to get rid of him.
Right. That's what the terrorists say in like the video to him. Like, we didn't realize you were trying to get us to kill Tony Stark. Like, we can get a lot of money for this. We're not going to just kill him.
Yeah. And then that's when I think they pivot, and then they're like, we have him. Why don't we have him build that?
Right.
Which is like a little, I don't know. It's a little convenient.
Yes. But so Obadiah is at the piano. He's trying to like reason with Tony, trying to get him to like, you can't stop making weapons. This is like our lifeblood sort of thing. He's still trying to like keep it all under control.
Yeah.
Because his plan to just kill Tony off and take complete control has failed. And he's either trying to like just regroup and try and figure out what to do next, or thinking maybe he can just convince Tony, who's now in a more fragile state, to let him do what he wants.
Yeah.
But
the movie doesn't want to reveal him just yet either.
Right.
Too. But I think the biggest clue though is anyone playing a spooky piano is not a good boy.
I mean, Jeff Bridges, this entire movie is just a little unsettling.
Yes.
Like Jeff Bridges is so good, period. But he also just comes like across in a really disingenuous way. Like, it's very obvious that Tony isn't doing what he wants him to do, and he's annoyed, and he wants to take control. And but
I do think in the beginning you sort of get the sense, I sort of thought that he was just tired of putting up with Tony's shit, but wasn't necessarily this evil Machiavellian.
Well, there's a little bit of it, like when we're having the first, like the magazine covers of Tony and all that, like introspective, and like when they talk about Obadiah Stane taking over the company, building it up, and then there's the magazine covers where it's Obadiah and Tony, and Obadiah just looks like really put out that Tony came back. Like, it's obvious.
Well, he definitely thinks that Tony's pissing on his loafers or whatever.
Right. He's definitely just annoyed that he thought he had gotten Stark Industries when Howard died, and then Tony wasn't going to be a problem, and then Tony's like, yeah, no, this is my company.
I'm a problem. I'm a problem child.
I'm a big problem. But so as we like shift into Act 3, we're back in Afghanistan, and we see Obadiah meeting with the leader of the Ten Rings. And it's very quickly like, he's like, you couldn't do what I asked you to do. You couldn't kill Tony Stark, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the Ten Rings has harvested the ramshackle parts of Tony's first Iron Man suit.
Yeah.
And Obadiah's like, yeah, I'm taking that, and ends up just completely killing all of these
they
people.
they want Obadiah to build them an army of Iron Men for them to, or suits for them to wear or whatever.
Right, which Obadiah is like, no, I'm going to take this and I'm going to do what I want to do with it.
My suit.
This is for me. This is just my size.
Well, no, he makes it a little bigger.
He does. Well, I mean, yes, he could definitely wear the original suit though. That would be a Jeff Bridges size.
He's kind of a big boy though.
Yeah.
He's bigger than Tony.
That suit was bigger than Tony.
Well, but it was like tailor fit for Tony. It was just bulky.
The original suit was not.
He wasn't like a loose, like...
He kind of was.
He was in there nice and tight. There was just like a bulky armor to it. He wasn't like swimming in that suit. Like...
There was a little like more disjointed...
Like it was like baby's first suit and it was like too big for him.
I mean, it was. He was learning how to walk. He was learning how to fly.
No, I think it was just the outside of it was bulky to just be more armored or whatever.
But so Obadiah decides to take the suit back to...
Well, we get to see the cool screeching tech or whatever he has.
Oh my god, yes.
Where the like pops the veins out of your
ears.
face and...
Yes. Which he's like, it's only gonna last 15 minutes, and it's like, there's blood coming out of that man's ears.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and then the guy went in there and
killed him anyways. Yes. So there's like a weird section of time that happens in this, because Obadiah is in Afghanistan, takes the suit back, takes it to Sector 16, trying to get all these engineers to like reverse develop him a new suit, and then like Tony is asking Pepper to go get some stuff, and it just seems very quickly that like Sector 16 has all these blueprints and all this stuff, and they can't figure out the arc reactor.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of it is the timing of the movie. They want to wait until the end of Act 2 or into Act 3 to reveal Obadiah as the bad guy.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that stuff may be happening kind of concurrently with Tony field testing his new suits
Yeah.
and doing all the stuff in Afghanistan, or the second mission to Afghanistan.
Let's just talk for a second about why
Let's talk for a second.
We're talking right now about how Obadiah is hosting all of his master plans to assassinate Tony on the Stark Industries like computers. Like, it's on a ghost drive, but it's all on the Stark Industries. Like, come on,
I want
dude.
that. I want that thumb drive too, where it just like
Accesses
pulls
the
all
ghost
the files, all the secret files.
There's a lot of tech in these movies that I want.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, really, dude? Like, you're not going to be a little bit more covert about your assassination plot to take over this company? Like, dude.
Well, and I think it's once Obadiah is sort of revealed as the bad guy behind everything, the movie starts to shift in tone a little bit, and you get, whenever he's involved in, or he's in a scene, like the tension is ratcheted up, and like Pepper's in there, and you're like, get the fuck out of there, get out, get out. It's like a horror movie.
Leave. Yeah,
and
it was so scary. And then when he makes it back to Tony's house before Pepper even like gets to the garage, which is another weird time thing. But the scene when he like takes Tony's arc reactor with the screeching tech again, and it just felt so helpless.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and that the reveal of that, where it's Tony sitting and he's about to answer the phone, and then you hear the sound and you see his veins start to, but you don't see anyone come up behind him. You just see the veins start to pop out of his head. You immediately know, like, the shit's getting real.
It's super. And then like the first time I saw this, I was like, holy shit! Like, he's taking this thing, and
but I mean, Obadiah's plan is to take the newer
nice
arc reactor and use it in his suit, which is essentially going to kill Tony.
Not essentially, it absolutely.
Well,
is.
I know, but why doesn't he just kill him then?
I guess he wants him to just suffer.
I guess, but
I'm assuming he doesn't think that Tony still has the original arc reactor.
Well, sure, yeah, but I just think he might as well just kill him.
Shot him, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a certain like extent of like it's less suspicious if like maybe Tony his arc reactor just fell out, like sort of thing.
Guess.
That he might have the thing of, but it just made it like a lot more, of course, like aggressively tense. And I guess I wouldn't have wanted anyone to like swoop in and save Tony in that moment. Like, Rhodey was on his way there, of course, but
well, and he does help him up at the end.
Oh, he helps him up at the end, but there's the very intense scene where Tony is making his way back down to his laboratory to get to the original arc reactor that Pepper had put in
she put it in the
little glass case for him. And the music during that scene is super, super tense, and then they overlaid that like intense heartbeat over it. And it was like, holy shit. Like, it was like a really good, like, they did a really good job with it.
Like a pale green or something.
Oh, yeah. He's super, like, ghost-like. And it's like every beat that his heart beats is the shrapnel getting closer to his heart. So, like, it was a really, like, it was intense. And I thought they did a really good job with that. But then it just all seemed super rushed with, like, him getting it back in and just like grabbing a suit and going. And
well, and then he asked Jarvis if he thinks that
and Jarvis is like, no.
The suit will be good with this like shitty arc reactor, and he's like, no, dude.
No, actually, no.
But I kind of, I do like that where he is essentially depowered in the last fight, and he can't use all of his tricks.
Right. He doesn't have all of his cool weapons and stuff just because he doesn't have the power.
Repulsors don't work as well and all of that.
But he ended up coming up with a really cool way to do it because based on his tests, because when Tony found out when he flies too high and the ice starts to happen on his suit, like he loses power because he can't deal with the cold.
The suit ices up.
So he decides to take off, and Obadiah, of course, hasn't tested this, has no idea. So they get to this altitude, and he's like, how did you figure out how to deal with the ice? And Obadiah's like, what?
What? What now?
Come again?
Well, and it just shows how, they do this a lot with these characters, that they're superheroes without their powers or without their tech. He's just super smart and is outsmarting the villain at every turn.
I made a note about that, is that Marvel does such a great job at like taking these people who are essentially like absolutely normal and making them into super beings based on like the merit that they come up with on their own. Like Tony builds himself these amazing suits. Cap has serum, but like it's also just like him as a person. Like Rhodey, Scott Lang, when we get into it, like all of these people don't actually have powers, and they still are incredible and manage to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like Hawkeye, he's just really good at shooting bow and arrow, like sort of thing. But yeah, they did a really good job with that. And can we just talk about Sector 16 for a hot second? Like the dank sewer dungeon that Sector 16 was.
Well, it's a secret. It's a secret lab. He's got to be.
It's not really. It's got a door right there. It was just kind of like
that
really
says like "Do not enter" or whatever.
The hanging chains and the dripping water, like. Really?
Nothing at the door. It's nothing weird's happening here.
No,
Don't,
this
like
is all
just keep
totally
going,
normal.
keep walking. Don't worry.
And I love Pepper just like trying to scan her thing and be like, what? It's not, why isn't it working? Like, okay.
Yeah, she sort of, as the movie goes on, becomes more of that like damsel in distress.
Yes, she does.
Or she's a little, not ditzy, but
I think they bring her back really well. Like,
yeah, well, she has a big part to play with
Right.
setting off the big arc reactor.
she's definitely like in parts of this movie super ditzy, and I think that they course correct really well in like Iron Man 2 and beyond, and she turns into like she's a match for Tony.
Yeah.
Because Tony needs a match, otherwise he's gonna get bored.
Well, and it is a little funny, like kind of hearing things about Gwyneth Paltrow and what we know about her just as a person.
Right.
Her in this movie, she's the one who like is essentially running Tony's life, and
Right.
I don't think Gwyneth Paltrow in real life could do that. She doesn't know
Gwyneth
what day it
Paltrow-
is.
no.
or-
Gwyneth
what movie
Paltrow is
she's
in these
in, or-
movies, and I don't think she has ever like thought about the Marvel Cinematic
Yeah.
Universe or the Marvel as like a thing. She probably thinks Batman is Marvel. Like, you know, she's just she's like
she's all about that goop. I think that's
ew. But yeah, and I feel like there's a real like when Stain and Tony are fighting, like Obadiah keeps shouting like, "I built this company from nothing," blah, blah. And it's like, dude, what? Howard built this company.
Well, and
like,
I think at this point he has crossed the line and is full cuckoo crazy.
oh yeah,
and
he's lost it.
yes.
But yeah, so Tony ends up winning, of course. Of course.
Well, and I like how he does it. Because he understands the tech. He pulls
Right.
out the targeting system or the wires that connect
Right.
that or whatever. So Obadiah can't.
Yeah, he
hit
knows
him.
what to go for.
Yeah.
Because he built it. So it's like, really, you thought you were going to use my stuff against me? Like, no, you're not. I like that Tony and Pepper don't end up together in this movie. Like,
Yeah, well, the line that when they're just before the press conference at the end, it looks like they're gonna have this big moment. The music is starting to swell, and she's like, when
Saying
she's
all
talking
these
to him,
things,
yeah,
yeah.
it sounds like it's gonna go one way, and then she immediately pivots and is like, and then you left me, and
Yeah.
like,
He's like, don't you ever think about that time? And she's
Yeah.
like, yeah. And then you never came back.
so it makes the moment in Iron Man 2 that much more.
Right. Which, again, we
impactful.
don't get until the very end.
Yeah.
Which I think it made it a much more realistic build up instead of just being like, yeah, of course, this is like his love interest. It's going to happen. Done. Like, which
Yeah.
I also think that these movies, all of these movies do a pretty good job with it. I mean, Thor kind of fucks up because Natalie Portman, they end up together pretty quickly. Captain Marvel doesn't have a love interest, which I kind of love just
Yeah.
as a woman. There's a big problem with me with Wonder Woman, like, to derail completely, but with like DC specifically, they're very on focus with like Superman's girl, Lois Lane. They're very on focus with Catwoman or whoever Batman is seducing at the time.
Yeah.
And in Wonder Woman, like Steve Trevor is really, really important to Wonder Woman as a character, like period. But like the Wonder Woman movie, like the fact that she was like, "I love you," just felt like really like you don't.
Well, and I think that Captain Marvel, they do that on purpose with that
Right.
character because they wanted her to stand on her own
Right.
and not sort of be compared to the man
anything.
in her life.
Yeah, which I adore because just as a female myself, we just don't ever get to that.
Yeah.
It always seems like we need a man to prop us up, and we
well,
don't.
and I think even with Black Widow, they kind of try to do that with Hulk, but eventually they sort of.
But I think that
drop
was
that
that
and-
was a reverse because Black Widow was definitely supporting. I mean, Natasha was definitely supporting Bruce. Like,
Yeah.
Bruce was the one that needed help. Like, she was the strong person. But anyways, I just love that they don't end up together yet. Like, obviously they're meant to be together, and RDJ and Gwyneth do have like great chemistry. The whole thing was really good, but it doesn't happen in this time.
Yeah, well, and I think Tony shouldn't get everything that he wants.
I agree.
I think that helps him become a better person and realize that he needs to
Pepper.
change.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
But so he ends up beating Obadiah, doesn't quite get the girl. We end up going to another press conference where Coulson is saying, "You're going to say these things. There was not like none of this happened. Obadiah's going to die somehow else. Like, we're going to cover this up, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And
well,
Tony,
there's a nice nod to the comics where he's looking at the back or his story or whatever, and he brings up the fact that they want him to say that Iron Man is his bodyguard. Who in the comics, no one knows that Tony is Iron Man.
Right.
Even the Avengers don't know that Tony's Iron Man. They know know Tony and they know Iron Man, and everyone thinks that Iron Man is Tony's bodyguard.
Interesting.
And Tony's sort of the benefactor for the Avengers, but Iron Man is just a separate entity.
Interesting.
And what's one thing that I think Marvel does well in making the world feel more realistic is they don't even try to establish a secret identity with any of the characters.
Well, and
except for Spider-Man, really.
But that's all because of RDJ, because his I Am Iron Man line was completely ad-libbed. And because he made that decision, like, Marvel doesn't fuck with secret identities, like you just said.
Yes. Well, and I think that in the comics it works because you have added drama where they are protecting their identity for the sake of their loved ones or whatever. They're trying to do it sort of on the down low. But and that in itself has drama because this person is suspecting them and they're trying to hide it and whatever. But that is not a realistic thing.
And then there comes into like this trap where the most gut-punching storylines are their loved one, like their secret identity being found out and their loved one being taken. And it's like Marvel doesn't fuck with that trope at all. Marvel's like, there's bigger things that these guys can deal with.
I think this movie, it has some of the tropes of the superhero movies, but it definitely drops a lot of the other ones and creates some new ones too. But it's trying to sort of tell a new, different story, which I like. And I think it definitely helps ground it because in the movies, when you see Superman as Clark Kent, you're like, motherfucker, you're the same dude.
You've got glasses on. No one's going to not think that
that level of disbelief is one thing in the comics, but it's it just doesn't track in real life. Yeah. And to be around the same people as Superman and as Clark Kent and no one has a fucking clue. Right.
Well, and there's an extent with like Batman too. Batman's mask like doesn't cover very much. Yeah. Like you can tell his jawline. Like it's not going to be like that. It's
yeah.
I agree.
Well,
with you.
and I mean, I think it sort of struck me in looking at all the Marvel movies. That is just something that they're not interested in.
Right.
And even in Spider-Man, at the end of Homecoming, May finds out that he's Spider-Man, and it looks like MJ just knows matter-of-factly that he's Spider-Man, just going from the trailers. Right. I just think that it's just another thing that sort of sets up the MCU or sets apart the MCU from the other guys.
In Infinity War, when he meets Doctor Strange, he's like, "I'm Peter Parker," and he thinks Doctor Strange is using a made-up name, and he's like, "Oh, I'm Spider-Man."
Yeah.
Like he's clearly moving past a lot of the, but he's also a teenager in this world, which is a lot different than, of course, like Tony is an adult man that has more than enough money to like secure his own safety, sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think you'll see, and partly by Tony's hubris, but in Iron Man 2 and in Iron Man 3, he's basically daring the world to fuck with him. Oh, yeah. And that ends up biting him in the ass a few times. So
bites the Avengers in the ass, bites him in the ass. It's a whole thing.
His ass is pretty bitten up.
Ew. His metal ass.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we have the big like final scene of him saying, "I am Iron Man," and then that's where it ends. Like
and it's definitely it's a mission statement to just end it at that point and say, here we are. This is going
to be Marvel.
This is the world that we're in.
And I think they did a great job. Like I think this movie is awesome. I think it was a great introduction to Marvel as someone who had never really thought of Marvel beyond like the X-Men. I had no idea who Iron Man was, and I immediately loved this movie. I was like, I want to see more of this guy, more of this stuff. I think it was great. And we end up with our very, very first post-credit scene all the way at the end. This was back in the day when they only did one post-credit scene, not like 3 or 4. But it was, of course, an even more exciting post-credit scene because it's Nick Fury. This was our first time seeing Nick.
Samuel L. Jackson,
incredible.
Yeah. Who at the time, or leading up to this, in the Ultimate line of Marvel Comics, which is sort of a rebranding and updating of some of the...
It's based on him.
Yeah, the artist used him as the likeness. So the comics, it looks like Sam Jackson.
That's amazing. But it's Sam Jackson being in Tony's home and saying, "I want to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative," which in a chronological rewatch, we know he's already been working on since the 90s, since meeting Captain Marvel. And he alludes to, like, you've become a part of a bigger universe. You just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
Which I think is like a really cool line. It was a cool way to do that.
Just as an aside to the world that the MCU is gonna build.
But yeah, so that's our post-credit scene, and it's basically just like, holy shit, more cool stuff is coming. And they teased, like, this is several years before Avengers was ever gonna happen. Yeah. So it's laying like some super early breadcrumbs of like, eventually you'll have the Avengers.
What do you think Nick Fury was doing from 1995 until now?
Well, he became director of S.H.I.E.L.D. somehow, so that's pretty solid.
But does he like have all kinds of secret files of like different people and...
I don't know. I mean, that's a good question, because it seems like they've been keeping tabs on a bunch of people, and like he recruits Natasha, Clint, like those people are like a part of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like I think he's been, at least once he saw Captain Marvel and saw that there were people like her in the world, and of course like Cap hasn't been found yet technically, but was like another example of like a superhuman person that could be a part of this initiative.
Well, and I think because Hulk is at this point is running around the world before Iron Man 1.
Yeah.
Because Incredible Hulk picks up in 2010, but it is... I think he's been Hulk for 5 years or something at that point.
I don't know. We're going to find out again now that I've bought it. So,
yeah, Courtney's very excited to have to watch that. So,
it's the only Marvel movie I had to buy for this podcast. But yeah, so I think like he's probably spent like a solid amount of time like trying to recruit, trying to find these people, like because he has Natasha ready to go, he has Clint ready to go, like, and when we get to Winter Soldier, one of the Hydra agents talks about like all these persons of interest that they've been keeping tabs on, like Stephen Strange is mentioned, which we'll get into why that's a little timey-wimey bullshit later when we go into Winter Soldier. But like I think that these people have been like, if Hydra's keeping tabs on them, Hydra is
the Ancient One knew about
I know, but
Stephen Strange in 2012. So.
Yes, but Hydra,
maybe she's a Hydra agent. Fuck.
No, not Tilda Swinton. But during Winter Soldier, Hydra is embedded in S.H.I.E.L.D. So what Hydra knows is what S.H.I.E.L.D. knows. So there's a really solid possibility that this is what Nick Fury has been doing, is trying to find more of these people.
Well, and it'll be interesting to see, because they haven't specifically said when the Black Widow movie is taking place. But I think my guess is obviously it's going to take place before Avengers and Iron Man and all of that. And it would be somewhere in between Captain Marvel and probably closer to the Iron Man side of things in the timeline, just because of how old Natasha is. Right. Maybe that will clear some of that stuff up.
And so, we also had 2 deleted scenes. There was one that I thought could have kind of made it in and felt okay because we didn't really get more of it. The first one was an extended version of Tony in the casino in the beginning. And it was really just like him blowing extra money and having more interaction with Rhodey. But I don't think we needed it. I thought we got a really good introduction to Rhodey and their relarelationship in the short scene that we had.
The way that scene was cut together in the concise manner definitely helped move the story along, but also it already set everything up too. So
and then the second scene is Tony going home to his like actual home, like alone for the first time, and Jarvis saying welcome back. Of course it wasn't Jarvis in the scene because the scene wasn't finished, which was really weird to just hear like another random voice over a PA pretending to be Jarvis.
Welcome back.
And Jarvis telling him he has something like 50,000 emails or something, and Tony just deciding to delete them all. That I thought could have been maybe in there, but again, not super necessary. I see why they took it out. They got enough of his like coming home with his interactions with Pepper and Rhodey and all of that stuff instead. That's basically Iron Man. What do you give this out of 6 Avengers? Oh shit. From a Natasha to a Hulk, what do you give it?
the smallest Avenger to the biggest Avenger?
Yeah, exactly.
I would say this is pretty flawless. He's
doing some calculations on his phone right now, guys.
Well, I have to I rate them normally in 5 stars, so now I have to convert them to...
Do you want a concept of what you gave everything else? Because you gave Captain America, the first Avenger, 4.5 Avengers.
Yeah, I think this movie edges that out a little bit. It's not perfect, but I'm going to say 5 5 out of 6.
5 Avengers? Which Avengers are they?
It's just all 5 Iron Man armors.
Oh, okay.
From all the
Marvel suits.
all of the yeah.
I'm probably going to give this, when I'm thinking about all the other movies in the universe, I love this movie though. So I'll probably give this a 4.8 Avengers. I think it's definitely not my favorite. It's not my favorite.
Isn't that's what you gave first Avengers, isn't it?
No. Is it?
I think it is.
Yeah, it is. I think on par, like, solidly, because that's not my favorite Cat movie either.
Well, no, but I think just this movie gets a little bit more.
This movie was rated a lot better. This movie had a 79 on Metacritic, a 7.9 on IMDb, and a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
So this movie definitely was like received a little bit more than Cap was, and
I think just out of the gate, this was the beginning of it all.
made more too. Yeah. It ended up making like 200 plus million more than Cap did. I would put this on par. Like this and I mean, Thor's not my favorite origin story, but we'll talk about that later. But it's a very solid origin story, and it laid really good groundwork for the rest of the universe. And I do love it, but I think that there are movies that I love Tony more in. Yeah.
Well, and I think he just keeps evolving, and he does change a little bit as we go on, but he is going to he's going to learn his lesson.
So that's Iron Man. So next time, what are we talking about next time, Tyler?
Iron Man 2.
Real exciting. Some more Iron Man talk, because that's next in the chronological order. So thanks for listening. Be sure to check us out on
all
Instagram,
the social medias,
and Facebook and Twitter. We're on all of them. We're either Marveling Pod or Marveling Podcast, one or the other.
And marvelingpodcast.com.
And marvelingpodcast.com. That's right.
Website.
I did spend a lot of time making that website. We'll see you next time when we talk about Iron Man 2. I'm Courtney.
I'm Tyler. Keep marveling.
Scene in NCIS where like
motherfucker, I do not watch NCIS.
there's a scene, but just like a really bad
I've seen
hacking
that
scene.
meme where there's like 4 hands on the keyboard.
Yes, they're on the same keyboard, and he's like move over, and so they can type on both sides of the keyboard. It's the stupidest thing.
Yes, it's NCIS. Why are you watching NCIS?
I don't watch NCIS. I've just seen that scene as an example of bad hacking. Okay. Stop shaming me.